Hi there, this is Clovis. This video is about PhysX Painter 2.0 and we're going to talk about brush options. In the previous video, we've added some assets into the colliders list and into the assets list. So now we can go into the brush option tabs and start to paint. So let's press the paint asset button, which is the main one you're going to use. So here, when I press it, it starts the paintbrush, and if I left click and drag over my colliders, it will add assets on top of their surfaces. And if I release my left click mouse button, it will start to play the physics simulation. Okay. And if I left click and drag again, it will stop the simulation and add more assets. Okay, when I release the mouse, it starts the simulation again. I can left click and drag to stop the simulation and start painting again. And it adds more assets. So if I want to quit the tool, I can press right click. Okay, so let's delete these objects. You see that when I pressed this paint asset button, it turns everything to gray and all the new painted assets are green. This is because of these options. So if I quit the tool, you see that this is the static color, so you can change it. This is the green. This green color is for the simulated objects. And you can choose to not display these colors by unchecking this checkbox. So we can paint directly with the materials. But sometimes using these colors is very useful. For example, if I add more assets like that, okay, each time I paint again more assets, it stops the simulation of previous assets, which means that the previous simulation may not be finished. So some assets might be flying or not looking like they are physically correctly placed. So I will just quit the tool and show you, for example, here those assets are just flying, okay, which can be cool, but it's not what I want in this case. So I will turn this on and go back to my brush. And if I press the Control key and left click and drag, you see that the assets under the mouse are turned green, which means that they will be simulated when I release the left click button. So I release and now they are simulated. Okay, this one is not because it's there are some more assets here hanging like that. Okay, so I release the mouse and they are simulated. Okay, fine. Now if I press the Alt key and left click and drag, it will delete the objects under the brush. Okay, so again, this might end up with some flying assets like that. Okay, so I can press Control key, left click and drag, and resimulate the flying assets. I release the mouse and boom, they are simulated. Okay, so when we are into the paintbrush mode, you see that in this new version I can go into the UI and change things here, which I couldn't do in the previous version. Okay, so now you can even go into 3ds Max UI and change things without quitting the brush, which is super useful to change some parameters here. Okay, so let's now delete these assets. Now let's talk about the distance value. So I'm going to check all these options off, okay? and start to paint again. So you see that by default the distance value 1 is made to try to not overlap too much the assets. Okay, so this distance is not based on scene units or objects units or anything. It's just based on the object size. So bigger assets like this box uh, will have a bigger gap. Small assets like this glass will have smaller gap, etc. Well, so it means that it doesn't matter which scene size you're using, or which units or which asset size. This distance value is always going to work. So 1 is the default, whatever units you're using. So if now I change this value, if I increase the distance, for example, you see that the separation is going to be bigger. And if I put it to 0, okay, they are overlapping a lot. Okay, so I can change this distance value here, but I can also press Shift and Control key and left click and drag to change it. Okay, and you see that the value on top of the brush circle here is the distance value. Okay, so you do not have to go back to this UI to change the distance value. Okay, cool.